Fans of Game of Thrones and fans of fantasy in general have been singing their praises for the new series House of the Dragon. The series, created by the author of Game of Thrones, George R.R. Martin, and Ryan Condal, is a prequel series to Game of Thrones. Condal worked on the original series, so between these two, the show is bound to be an instant classic. The show is based on Martin's book Fire and Blood, which takes place about 2 centuries before the events of Game of Thrones. The plot follows the House of Targaryen's demise and the war-dubbed Dance of the Dragons. The series premiered in August of 2022 and has received a lot of attention online. Keep watching to hear all about the behind-the-scenes drama, the ins and outs of capturing dragons in such a gorgeous manner, and casting choices that ultimately fell through. Did you know that House of the Dragon had more than double the viewers on the night of its premiere than Game of Thrones did? The premiere of Game of Thrones brought 4.2 million viewers in, and due to the scope and hype surrounding the show, it was able to draw in nearly 10 million. They not only outpaced the very popular original series, but these numbers also gave HoTD the record-breaking title of the most-watched series in HBO history. Due largely to its immediate success, the show was actually renewed by HBO for a second season just a few days after the first episode premiered. By then, the show had amassed an impressive 20 million viewers, making this an easy decision for HBO. Not only that, but House of the Dragon is loosely based on real-life events. Martin took inspiration from the 12th century English Civil War while writing the novel that this series is based on. This real-life conflict surrounded King Henry I's daughter, Matilda, and her own cousin as they battled for the throne of England. Anyone who is familiar with Game of Thrones knows that struggle over power is a very common theme that is represented all throughout the series. Martin first revealed this fact during Comic-Con on a panel. Even the original series was based on a similar conflict, the War of the Roses, another medieval war. Martin is particularly interested in medieval politics and loves to examine just how these things would have played out in that time period. Martin said, "I get inspirations from history, and then I take elements from history, and I turn it up to 11. House of the Dragon is based on an earlier period in history called the Anarchy. Many characters from the series are based on real people from the period of the Anarchy. For example, King Viserys I is clearly an analog for King Henry, whose daughter was a key component of the English Civil War. Matilda was King Henry's only heir, and therefore inherited the throne after his death. Henry had anticipated this after losing his only son, William. He spent the last years of his life trying to prepare Matilda to rule, and she did end up inheriting the throne as the Empress Matilda. After this, her own cousin, Stephen, enlisted his brother for help and attempted to usurp her. This conflict was the catalyst for the war. This plotline will be very familiar if you've seen the first episode of House of the Dragon. King Viserys loses both his wife and son while she is in labor with him, and we will see him then name his daughter Princess Rhaenyra Targaryen as his successor. Even Stephen is represented in the show as Prince Daemon Targaryen. The biggest difference between the show and history is that Daemon is portraying Rhaenyra's uncle, not cousin. The age difference was likely put into the story to raise the stakes for Rhaenyra. Did you know that Martin has always drawn so much inspiration from actual historical events? It is reported that the Civil War storyline will not last very long. It seems it is no more than a jumping-off point. No need to fret, though. This franchise has an enormous scope and so many storylines, characters, and historical periods to explore. Showrunners will absolutely have plenty of material and may even jump backward or forward in time to keep the show interesting for loyal fans. Speaking of Prince Daemon, did you know that Matt Smith was the first choice of the producers to play the role? The showrunners are quoted as revealing, "Matt is really the only person we talked about. We would say, like a Matt Smith or a Matt Smith type when talking about Daemon. It's no wonder they thought this. After watching him in his role, we can't imagine anyone else else playing this role. If Matt Smith looks familiar to you, but you can't place him, you may recognize him from Doctor Who or The Crown. The showrunners knew that Smith had the right look, energy, and acting talent to bring this complex character to life. Matt Smith showed his strength as an actor, especially well when he was accidentally injured during the filming of a stunt in Portugal, and he managed to stick it out throughout the rest of the season. He waited until filming was complete before going to physical therapy. Well-trained actor or reckless behavior? HBO describes him as the younger brother to King Viserys. And peerless warrior and dragon rider, Daemon possesses the true blood of the dragon. But it is said that whenever a Targaryen is born, the gods toss a coin into the air. This character is quite entitled, but we can understand why he may feel this way. After all, at age 16 he was knighted and inherited a priceless Targaryen heirloom, an ancestral sword called Dark Sister. He is also no stranger to ruling a population of people. His character initially held the positions of Master of Coin and Master of Laws. Apparently, these roles were not satisfying enough for him, as his character does exactly what the real-life Stephen did to Matilda. Sometimes directors will create odd rules for the cast in an effort to bring forth the best performances possible. Miguel Sapochnik, the director, asked actors Emma Darcy and Millie Alcock to refrain from speaking to each other or watching each other's sets. Even though the two actors played the same person, they each portray a different version of Rhaenyra, one much older than the other. The director was nervous that the actors would accidentally copy each other, and he was really interested in each actor's natural interpretation of the princess. Some of you may be wondering, how exactly were the dragon riding scenes filmed? Millie Alcock revealed at Comic-Con that a mechanical bull was used to replicate the natural movement that riding a dragon would bring. In addition to the bull machine, actors were placed high in the air to create room to animate the dragon into the shot. This sounds terrifying, but Alcock joked that it reminded her of a bar, and they all had harnesses. This is an unusual but genius move. We can't think of a better way to portray this type of activity. Most fans will remember that George R.R. Martin had a strong response to the original Game of Thrones, and it wasn't a positive one. He is not afraid to criticize the works based on his novels. However, House of the Dragon was so incredible that George immediately let the showrunners know how impressed he was with an enthusiastic text message the night of the premiere. Martin has told the world that he was especially impressed to see the show's version of King Viserys. He said, "I am vastly impressed by the show's version of King Viserys, played by Paddy Considine, who gives the character a tragic majesty that my book Viserys never quite achieved. We can't imagine higher praise coming from George." After all, Ryan told fans he was very touched by the message George sent to him on the night of the premiere. He describes it as having more exclamation points than I've ever seen in one place. That must have been a very exciting night. Many fans of Game of Thrones say that they loved the show up until the last few seasons, and some people even say that the ending of the series was one of the worst in television history. Showrunners Ryan Condal and Miguel Sapochnik are determined not to make the same mistake. They have planned the entire series, including the ending, and HBO is not planning on standing in their way while telling the story. Hopefully this series will have a much better ending than Game of Thrones. With the success of this new series, you can safely assume that more spin-offs are to come. Jon Snow's character is supposed to be reprised in a new spin-off. In addition to that, there are reportedly many other spin-offs planned. Another project planned was to revolve around the ancestors of the Stark family and the Lannister family. This project was doomed from the start, however, when showrunner and HBO chief content officer Casey Bloys both agreed that the pilot was not working. Warner Media chairman Bob Greenblatt shared his view of the experience. "I said to Casey, this just doesn't work, and I don't think it delivers on the premise of the original series, and he didn't disagree, which actually was a relief. So we unfortunately decided to pull the plug on it. There was enormous pressure to get it right, and I don't think it would have worked." Some other projects attached to Game of Thrones will include more live-action prequels, a stage play, and even some animated projects. This is not exactly a surprise, with the dedicated following that the books and both series have amassed. The insane number of viewers reported for this new series was surely a factor in the decision to create all these new projects. projects. Which are you most excited about? We can't wait to see the animated projects in particular. Fans of this franchise are probably relieved to hear that HBO is so concerned with the quality of the work included in this universe. It's clear that they learned from the disastrous final season of Game of Thrones and have learned exactly what audiences want to see. What about you? Have you seen House of the Dragon? If so, are you excited for the next season? Please let us know down below. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.